Welcome back. So continuing on with my DRZ build here. This build, I'll just catch you up to speed here. This will all be part of one video, but it's over several weeks long. I've been suffering from some bad cold flu type thing and just have zero energy lately. It's probably that virus that was going around, a couple of years ago and got blown out of proportion, or whatever you want to, however you want to view it. Anyways, it feels like when I supposedly had that, you get what I'm getting at. Anyway, so I've just been really tired lately, and I've been taking a lot of natural supplements and things like that, and vitamins, and I'm getting better slowly. That's one of the reasons why this project has been on hold. Another reason why is because every time I take something apart on this bike that needed work or I needed to check out, I've found that somebody else has taken it apart and put it back together the wrong way. So, and then I've got to order parts, and every time I have to order parts, it's at least a week. It's at least like 5 days away. So I've been ordering stuff from Fort 9 just because it's not always the cheapest for me, but it's usually the fastest because they're right in the province. I think they combined the last order, and it was a couple days apart when I took the carb apart from when I ordered my wheel spacers for the rear wheel and the front wheel. So what happened here, I'll just give you some background is, oh, there it goes there. So I took the carb apart because these guys that I got it off said that it wasn't idling right. And then, as I told you in an earlier video, that was because the stator was cooked, and these bikes won't idle if the stator's cooked. So I thought that, well, the bike's been sitting for so long that I better take the carb apart and clean it anyways. And they did suspect that it was dirty, so that's a good enough reason right there. And when I took it apart, I found that if you look at your bottom carb gasket here, this O-ring, this molded O-ring, look what they did. It's just mashed, and I couldn't even get it back into, I put it back in the channel, but it didn't matter. As soon as I just put some brake clean in there. That's what I like to use because it's a little bit thinner and penetrates a little bit better than gasoline, and that's good to check for leaks. So I just squirted some brake clean into it when I was cleaning the carb, and it just started pouring right out, of course, right? So that's what it looks like. Get it up a little bit closer. So that's kind of a rookie move, doing something like that. So I had to order just got this Moose carb rebuild kit here, and there's a couple O-rings in there. I guess if I can figure out which ones are which, I'll replace them, but the main one is I needed that O-ring, so I had to spend like 68 bucks on a carb rebuild kit that I don't think I needed. I might change I see there's a needle in there, a main needle. I might change that just because I've got a new one, and that rubber tip on them can dry out and it's dirty, as you likely know. So that's one thing I had to wait a week for. And then I got my Moose wheel spacers here because my old ones, this is for the front, they only come with one because they're supposed to drive on the other side. My old ones have some grooves in them. I was showing a little bit of wear. Probably would be okay, especially since I made the hubs greasable. But if I'm gonna go in and replace wheel bearings and seals, I thought spend the extra 30 bucks or whatever this was and get some spacers too. The other thing that when I took it apart, you guys saw that the neutral safety switch, the people I bought it off told me that it wasn't working either. As I explained, this has to be bought, the pawls you can't buy separately, which are right here. And I was supposed to buy the whole switch with these assembly, and it's quite a lot more. I don't feel like spending more money on this project at the moment. So what I found is I have one of these left. They must have dropped the other one and couldn't find it or something, or didn't notice it. Who knows, when they took the neutral safety switch apart. So I found that a valve stem from one of my wore out valves that I changed in the head is almost exactly the same diameter, and it fits into the end of the shift drum perfectly. It's like 0.1 of a millimeter or something, is within the same diameter as your shift pawl. So that's one you could, if you got an old valve laying around and it's out of this bike, it's not out of another bike, another engine, you can always just build a shift pawl. So I just put that in a drill press. I cut a piece of the valve stem off that's the same length. It's just a little bit shorter, it's not going to matter. And then I just put it in drill press and spun it and ground it with my die grinder. And then I took the spring out of a ballpoint pen. And that spring's longer and it's not quite as stiff as the one that came out of it. This may be a carb spring out of a carburetor. This is quite a stiff spring, so I'm not sure if this spring is going to work or not, but you know what? It's worth a try. So I'm going to put that into my neutral safety switch and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, I'm not out anything. I'll just buy another switch. Hopefully this O-ring isn't too thick. It's a thicker, it looked like a thicker durometer than the one they took out. It was a little bit square. I'll find out. The other thing with the neutral safety switch is it had Phillips screws that get kind of mashed like that to get out. It's tough, so I'm going to replace those with a socket screw like this. I found some that are the same thread pitch, length and everything, which is a bonus, in my junk drawer at work. So that's what I'll be putting back together. The part that I really want to get finished is this carburetor. I really want to get this back together because, as you can see, to continue working on the bike, I want to get the carb in there and the intake system buttoned up before I put the fuel tank and stuff on it. And I want to get all that done so I can take it down and actually register it. So I'll get the carb back on, wheel back on, all that stuff completed, and then I'll do the front wheel bearings after that. I just don't want to take too many pieces, like I've mentioned in the past, take too many pieces apart at the same time. I'd rather get one part of the bike put back together at a time, so you don't have a bunch of stray parts on your table. It's just more chance of things getting lost and mixed up with other stuff. So I'm going to see what I got in this bag of parts for my carburetor rebuild kit. I doubt if the jets are the same size. Let's see, it's got a 150 in it. I'm guessing that these are probably made for around sea level. This doesn't even, I don't see any numbers on this jet. They might be on the side of the jet. These are just Mikuni jets. Let's have a look. Not sure if this is my main or not. Okay, it does say. What do we got here? That's 625. That must not be the main jet. Let's see, there's another one in here. What else have we got? This is pilot jet in there. Is the main? No, that's the one I just had, 625. Okay, what do we got here? This one says, dang it, am I losing my eyesight? So I got a 142 here. Okay, so I got a 150 in it. Main is a 150. Yeah, okay. Well, I have had this apart and cleaned it, and I don't see any reason to replace the jets. If I do have a new jet, if it's a 150, I don't think that's a 150. It's a little fatter. I'll keep those though in case this thing runs lean. But it was jetted for Calgary, which is maybe a little bit higher elevation than where I'm at. So at the most, it'll be a bit lean. I'm not worried about that. I think I'll just pull it apart, get that needle changed out, put my gasket on, and slap this thing back together. I want to get this bike running and back together and completed for riding in the spring. Okay, so turns out my main jet this is a little bit bigger than what I got in the kit, which the one in the kit I think is a 142. This is like a 150. So I'm gonna leave it with the bigger jet because I believe that's right for my elevation. Not sure, 142. Yeah, I don't know why they'd give me a leaner jet. I didn't replace, this is like an idle air screw, or this is some sort of air screw. I didn't replace that. I didn't need to. It looks fine. The new kit comes with a spring for that, but I don't think I need it. Comes with 3 new screws for the float bowl, which I won't be using because I like the socket screws it was in. A couple O-rings in there and a main needle. I'm not putting the needle in because, like I say, the needle and the main jet in here is probably for around the same elevation. So there is a diaphragm and some stuff in the top of this carb. There's not a lot to this carb. I think there's some videos on how to rebuild it that you can find on YouTube here. It works kind of like vacuum. It's got a butterfly and a slide. It's an interesting setup. I'm not super familiar with how this carb works, but as far as the jets go, it's quite simple. Your pilot, your main jet. There's a good explanation in the manual. I know a lot of guys talk about carb tuning like it's some black art, and you really got to know what you're doing. Yes, you need to know what you're doing better than the guys that did this. That's true, but just read your manual, watch the videos. There's not that much to it. Pilot jets make a big difference. Your main jet and your needle, that makes a difference too. You got to get close. You got to get the mixture right for your elevation is where you want to start. And then when it comes to needle profiles and things like that, that's kind of fine tuning. I find that it's quite an enjoyable part. Tuning is good work, and that's something that I personally enjoy. So if you've got a bike that's a little rich or it's not running right or something, and you think it's the carb, you know, I would encourage you just to learn about it and then start working on it. Like when you're doing things like this, and when you're losing parts like this, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be working on your bike. It just means that you need to subscribe to my channel and watch some more videos about working on your bike and learn how to do it. And then those things like that won't happen. Just thinking that this carb spring is, whoa, it's so close. It's just a bit too short. One of the springs that came in the carb kit for the shifter ball, or the neutral safety switch. Anyway, I'm not going to worry too much about that. I'm just going to try my little setup with the ballpoint pen spring. And if that doesn't work, then I'll deal with it after that. Now, you might find that sometimes these O-rings would be a little bit, see, this one's a little bit too long, it looks like. Doesn't want to stay in the groove. So as you know, the easiest way to get it to stay is just put some grease on it. And if you don't have any grease, Vaseline, like the original Vaseline, works just fine too. But since I have some grease right here, you don't need a lot. Oops, there goes the gasket. Just get some in that groove, and as you can see, this is nice, sticky, stringy bearing grease. And you want to get it in the corners and in the straight parts where it's gonna try to get out of there. You don't want to put too much in though, because you don't want to compress it. Of course, you could seal up and try to compress that grease in there, and then that could crack your aluminum housing. Let's see how nice that holds everything together. So these guys that were doing it the first time should have done that instead of letting that squish out and costing me money buying a carb kit. If you get a little bit in there, don't worry about it. All greases is thick oil. Gasoline's gonna dilute that down, wash it down. Gasoline's a solvent, aggressive solvent. And I'm going to just add a little bit of anti-seize on my screws. I know a lot of guys, they like to Loctite everything in motorcycles, and I understand the reasoning behind that, but not everything. Even a bit of grease or some penetrating oil is better than nothing, because you're, again, using dissimilar metals. You're using metal steel screws in an aluminum housing, and that's gonna make corrosion happen. So now I just gotta find my anti-seize and put some on those and put them back in. Okay, so I didn't make a video of cleaning this carb, but I did have it all apart, and I used some super clean to get the aluminum corrosion off of it, like I've used on other carbs. in my other videos. It works really good to clean off the corrosion. And when you're rebuilding them, what you want to do when you're into a carb is check your main jet, or your needle valve, I should say, because this one's in pretty good shape, but this rubber tip on the end can get pitted. A number of things can happen. It can get a little ring there from being seated into your main fuel inlet like that, just from the pressure on there, or sometimes it can get stuck in there because it's been sitting dry for a long time, or the rubber can get cracked. So you get what I'm getting at. That's what you want to check. You want to also check that this is very clean in here. If this doesn't need to be replaced. This is in pretty good shape. I just replaced it because I had a new one with my carb kit. This screen here, you can see how fine that mesh is. If you've got dirty fuel in there, you're not getting fuel into your carburetor, that can be the problem. You want to pull that out. Check this O-ring can be leaking here. So I replaced this whole piece, had a new O-ring on it, new screen, and of course the needle valve. So I'm going to keep this old one because there's nothing wrong with it as a spare. But those are just some things that when you take your carburetor apart, that you want to clean those out. And then of course your pilot jet here, these little holes here can get clogged if you got varnished fuel or corrosion or something in there, and you just want to make sure that's all cleaned up. Of course I blew all these out. I cleaned them with mineral spirits or brake clean, and I know that the inside of the carburetor is clean and it should work. One of the things that happened, so as I was mentioning, these folks that were working on this bike, they mentioned that I think they must have had the carb apart and had been trying to figure out what was wrong with it, because the choke lever was seized up and it would only move about that much. So of course that's not enough. So I took it apart. Now I did have it working. Maybe it seized again. I'd have to take it back apart again. But what happened was there's a ball and a seat with a spring seat and a lock ball there that is supposed to, there we go. It's just a bit stiff now. It's going to lock that in 3 different positions like this. So that's full choke, that's half, that's off. That was completely seized, and when I took it apart, I think that ball was not even in the proper spot, so it was somewhere into this tube here. So everything these guys took apart, they messed up when they put it back together. That, like I say, that's experience. That just comes with experience. They just made some rookie mistakes because they didn't know any better. So anyways, that's working now. That was something that I know I needed to take the carburetor apart to do. And then the other thing was, of course, the banjo bolt. So that put my project back over a week there. To get this, I had to get this right from the dealership. Of course, it isn't in town. I could have had it shipped, but I have to make a trip out there every once in a while to the city anyways. So, but if you're doing things like this, you definitely want to, you can see how close, how tight that was. Somebody's over torqued this. You want to read your manual a little bit more when you're doing, if things like this are happening when you're working on your motorbike. And you want to subscribe to my channel, watch all my videos, hit the like button, and let me tell you, you will be happy you did if you're going to work on your bike yourself. Now I'm ready to put the carb back on. I don't have a lot of time out here tonight. Like I say, I've just been bagged with this, whatever this cold or whatever it is, flu thing that I'm fighting is sapping my energy like you wouldn't believe. So I'll just go ahead, and I think I'm going to try and get this just mounted into the frame tonight. I think all the parts are here for this. That was one thing that the guys that I bought the bike off were not that good at doing mechanic work, but fortunately they had a friend who actually was a motorcycle mechanic, at least that's what they told me, and he was the one that took the top end apart and was going to do the valves for him, and he did a very nice job. He had all the parts bagged, measured, recorded. I think all that was missing was one sealing washer. Again, I had to get that from the dealership, and it took about a week to get. No, they had that in stock, pardon me. Anyways, it was just, you get my point. I've been waiting on parts, and that has made this job way longer. So I'm excited that I think I've got everything I need and I can put it back together. So yeah, that was the good part, is that at least they got their mechanic friend to do the important work on the engine, because they screwed everything else up. Now I'm going to, let's pop this in tonight. Let's do that. Okay, here she goes. Well, that was a bit of rodeo getting that in there. So you gotta tilt your subframe back, which is, I guess, normal. You know, I remember some of the old bikes, you can kind of get your carb back in there, and the boot was flexible enough to wrestle it in there. I didn't, like I say, this is the first time I've worked on one of these, and it was in pieces when I got it. So I guess that's just the learning curve when you're working on a basket case. Somebody else is taking apart. Orient your clamps the proper way. I've got the screws exposed here where I can get to them. This one was backwards, and when I tilted it up, I didn't like the idea that it was going this way. Not only does it look like a backwater mechanic did it, but it's hard to get a screwdriver in there to tighten it. So I took the carb back out and put that on the same, oriented it the same as the front one. So make sure you do that before you get the carb in there. You got to kind of put the carb in this way, sideways, and then turn it to get your boot lined up. That's what I found works well. And then I can pop the intake boot back on when I lower the subframe, and there's just enough room to get your connector in. So try to fish your wires in between here for your TPS and stuff. Hook those up while you're putting the carb in, because they don't give you any extra space in here. So I got to figure out how all this stuff's oriented and just get it all set up. These guys that took it apart, they kinked one of the throttle cables, and it's a little bit frayed, so it's got like a little jagger coming off it. And I must have poked my hand. Every time I touched it, it seemed like that poked into my hand and into my skin. Very annoying. I think I can get at the lock nuts and adjust the throttle cables from the other side. So I'll be doing that. It's just nice to be this far along with this. Getting that intake boot on is going to be a bit of a bear. But that's about all I got for tonight, so I'm going to call it a night. I'm just still not, I don't have a ton of energy, and I want to go in and just maybe watch some other YouTube videos and relax. So I'm going to hopefully get this pretty much back together this weekend, I hope. Got an extra day off because of the long weekend here in Canada land, but I also have to do some work for one of my neighbors. Be on with this project tomorrow. All right, here's where I am currently. Got that rear wheel off. I'm doing the wheel bearings. They were completely finished. I'll show you what they looked like. Okay, there's one of the, there's two on the thrust side, right? One's a 6003 or something like that. And the other one's a little bit bigger. And then there's just one of these on the brake side. But you can see the inside of that bearing. The stuff that's fallen out of it's caked up grease, but it's got a lot of rust, and I don't think there's a lot of dirt in there, but it's rust and just crusty grease. This one's got a little bit more. That's the inside bearing though. Actually, no, that's the outside. It's a little bit bigger. So it just probably had a little bit more grease in it, and it's still spinning from new. And then that's I think this is the brake side one. I just popped the seals out, take a look, yeah, and you can see the rust coming out of there. This one doesn't have any grease, it looks like, it left in it, and it's obviously it was still turning, but it seized up now after I drove it out. Anyway, I just was going to show you guys that, because that's what happens when there's not when these bearings are new and there isn't much grease in them, like I keep showing on my videos. So what I like to do, I've got my new bearings here. So I popped the seals out of these bearings. I left the outside seal in the outside bearings. Okay, that one's still got the seal in it. And I've just drilled a really small hole. You can see the hole in the big one there. Okay, that's gonna go to the outside. And I just drilled and tapped my grease nipple in there, which is gonna go inside the hub. And you got your bearing spacer that's gonna go in the middle. So that's gonna fill that cavity with grease around there. And it's gonna add a little bit of unsprung weight, but we're talking about a 20-year-old bike here, and it's a dual sport. It's not like a new KTM 6 days, and that much grease in there isn't gonna be that much unsprung weight. Anyways, you get my point. It's more of a benefit to have it in there. So what I do is I'm gonna take the seals, the wheel seals, and I'm gonna put this one in backwards, just like you do on, if you've ever worked on S-cams on heavy duty trucks, trailers, air brakes. You always put your one seal in backwards so that the grease can be pushed out and it's not gonna build pressure in there, and just pop the seal out. So that'll release the pressure. Also the hole in the outside seal on the bearing is also so that the grease is gonna be coming from the inside, and it'll be able to go through that little hole and then out the seal here that's in backwards. And the reason why I do this is because when you're going through a lot of water and stuff, that's what's gonna happen to your bearings, especially these bearings that you get and they only have grease on one side of them and one side's open. It's allowing space for moisture and even just air, just the ambient, the moisture in the air is going to get in there, especially when it sits over the winter time and you've got hot cold cycles happening. Your bearings are gonna rust because they're not completely packed with grease. So at the very minimum, I would pop the seals out, repack them like I always do, like I show you guys on the videos, and then I'd put the seals back in and put the sealed bearings in if you're not gonna grease this housing, and then put your seals in the proper way. I should have got new spacers too. These ones are worn a bit. I just cleaned them up the best I could, and with the grease though going through there, once this is full of grease, I pump that full of grease with the grease nipple on there. The water's not gonna be able to get in. But if you do go through a bunch of water, I mean, a dual sport, are you gonna be doing that much anyways? They should last a long time. But if you do go do some creek crossings and stuff like that, when you come home that night, you can just hook up your grease gun, give it a couple pumps, and then you'll see that if there is water in there, it'll just push right out through this seal. And I didn't want to put the seal in backwards on the brake side because I don't want grease getting on my disc brake. It's not gonna hurt anything if some grease comes out of there and gets on the sprocket here. All right, that's where I'm at. I'm gonna pop these bearings in now and put the seals in, and I can get this back wheel back on, and that's done. I'll show you guys where I made the swing arm greasable. Okay, so pop a grease gun up in there and give it a couple shots in the fall or spring, whenever. That's another one. The other side, I don't know where it's gonna line up, so I've gotta figure the other side out yet. So I've bolted the engine back in. Make sure that when you're removing your swing arm bolt there, that you don't hit that too hard. You can bend those threads really easily because it being a hollow bolt, there's not much there. Even with a brass drift or something, you gotta be careful. So that's where I'm at. The engine's bolted into the chassis. I've got to fix the neutral safety switch. I've got to go get my banjo bolt probably tomorrow from the dealership. And what else have I got here? Clean up the carb, needs to be cleaned, taken apart, and put my exhaust and stuff on. So it's really, as you can see, it's really coming together. Once I get this engine in and everything back on it, I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get this thing fired up before I do the front wheel bearings. I'm not worried about front wheel bearings, that won't take very long. So it's coming along very nicely. I've been out here for most of the day just tinkering. I'm taking my time, and I'm pretty happy with the way things are turning out so far. Getting closer So the other night I did some work on it. I didn't think I had to really add it to the video. Just the back wheel, got that on, got the chain on, neutral, their shift indicator switch. The carburetor is fully mounted now and the subframe's bolted on, so that's kind of it can be tough getting that carb in there. It's tight between the frame here, the steel frame. You have to put it in sideways, kind of turn it, and you have to have your subframe unbolted to get this. This boot is particularly hard to get on there and get it all lined up. I think I got it all. You got to make sure the back side of this is seated onto the throat of the carburetor. Just make sure that's all sealed up so you don't dust your engine when you fire it up. So I've got my fuel tank off, cleaned up, and I'm ready to put that on tonight and throw the battery in it. I got to fill it with oil and antifreeze. And then I'm going to try and start it. I don't want to put anything else back together because if I've got any problems with the engine, I sure hope that's not the case. But if there is, then I don't want to have the bike completely put back together. I want to be able to, excuse me, to be able to take it back apart if I need to, as quick as possible. All right, so, oh great. Yeah, I cleaned the tank up, but then it sat in the back of my truck and I just took it down and put some fuel in it at the gas station. Anyways, that's what tonight's project is. I don't have too much time. Like so many other things with this bike, I'm running into little things along the way. Like the whole project, I ended up having to build a little tank mount out of a piece of rubber belting. It's supposed to look like that. So I'm working on getting used one of those. The other thing I noticed that the previous owners did, I got a bag with the signal lights, or in one of the boxes the signal lights were in. And they have these nice little connectors that are for going through these little holes in this back fender piece. I'm not overly concerned about this particular part of the project because I'm just going to buy a new one of the fender eliminator type things, or mud flap eliminators with little LED light instead of this big old incandescent one. But when I looked at it, somebody cut the connectors off. I have no idea why these guys did some of this stuff. So there's a bunch of more electrical tape up there. I'm just gonna have to see what is going on. Unfortunately, this bike wasn't washed off before they started working on it, which was another sign, you know, as far as I'm concerned. So anyway, yeah, butt connectors that aren't sealed to add on another 2 inches of wire, or 1.5 inches of wire. I don't know who does stuff like this. Then you got this other one that was all taped up. Like this is all the tape I took off of it. So man, these guys that did this really need to subscribe to my channel and watch all my videos. So there's some more electrical tape there. It feels like there's some connectors underneath that. So like I say, I'm gonna work on that a little bit, but the first things first, I have to see if this bike runs. So I'm sure that you guys are looking forward to finding out. So that's what I'm gonna do. Stay tuned. Okay, so here's where I'm at. Tank's just kind of sitting on there. I got the screws, the bolts loose, fuel turned on. Oh, it's off a little bit, but of course the carburetor, I'd had it apart, cleaned it, and I didn't adjust the jets. Like I turned the idle air screw in and stuff. So I don't know if that had a bearing on it or not, but it took a long time to get it to start, and I was starting to get worried. Like it was firing because the pipe was getting hot, but it was like it wasn't getting enough fuel or air or something, because I'd open up the throttle a bit, it would kind of sputter, but it couldn't run without the starter turning it over, if that makes sense. Anyway, so eventually I just kept playing with I had to put some gas down the intake, but that didn't help. I just kept playing with carb settings, and I can actually take the fuel air screw or the idle air screw right out and it'll idle fine. So that was too tight. I think I had it closed all the way in, and I've just been playing with the idle air. Anyways, I had to crank it over, put the battery charger on it, keep the battery topped up. Maybe it was just dry. I don't know. I thought that the float bowl would fill up. I don't know, maybe the needle was stuck a little bit or something like that. But you didn't miss anything, because it was just me cranking this thing over until I got scared the starter was going to get damaged. Sit here for a few minutes, let the battery charge up, and then turn it over again, and then play with the idle air screw and stuff like that. But in any case, here's where I'm at. No choke. And there we go. So, very happy that it runs. Put the air cleaner back in. Wow, that is very rewarding after all the work I've done on this bike and seeing it run. I just, you guys probably know it is just a really, really nice feeling getting a project almost complete. Now, I say almost complete, I've still got to put some plastics back on, and I still have to put front wheel bearings in it. So, and then I, fix the tail lights and some stuff like that, but for the most part, it's running. Like from what I bought this bike in boxes. There's a couple of them right there. And here it sits, rebuilt and running with the, the head was off. You guys saw what it looked like on my first video. So anyways, it's got this big old Clark oversized tank, and I'm sure the extra range is nice, but I mean, you can't even put full choke. See where the choke is? You can't even go full choke with that tank on. So wow. What a feeling. Anyways, I'm going to call her a night. That was kind of my goal tonight, was just to see if it would run. I don't need any of the plastics or anything on at this point. It was cold too. It's not super cold. I heard that there's a problem with these things filling up the carb. Also, look at somebody must have put the petcock in backwards. That's the way it was. Like the tank wasn't on this bike until tonight, since I've owned it. Don't ask me who did this. I don't know, maybe, is that the way a Clark tank works? I guess so, because your petcock has to be this way to see where your reserve and on and off is. So anyway, I'm gonna need a new piece of fuel line because that's just barely feeding it. That's not the reason why it wasn't starting, by the way. I put some fuel in the air cleaner. Now you can hear it idling and running really nicely. So that's not the reason why it didn't want to start. But the Clark tank makes it hard to get any coolant in it. The antifreeze is full. I filled it up the antifreeze, filled up the engine oil. Now the filter's full, I need to put a little more oil in it. A couple liters there. Anyways, I'm going to leave it at that tonight, like I say, and I'm going to go ahead and put the plastic and everything back on it here. Maybe later, maybe I'll get back out here later tonight, even get the air. I gotta clean the air cleaner and stuff, but I can probably slap the shrouds on, do something with the tail lights maybe. I'll see how. Just wanted to come out tonight and button this thing up and show you guys one last time. I've got to top up the oil after it filled the filter and stuff. I just got to put a little more in the reservoir. It might be the way it's sitting, I don't know. Anyways, I had the rear signal lights mixed up with the front. So it was the front signal lights, and they still had that little connector, which was good. So the guys had all the pieces were still there to put those back on. So I got them back on and wired up. It was these rear ones. The front ones I thought those ones were the rear because they were so much bigger. But these are some aftermarket ones, and they're super cheesy. They don't really fit too well. And then of course, the wiring that I showed you earlier in the back was all hacked and it needs work. So I got the wires hooked up, and all the signal lights working in case I'm asked. This thing is ready to go though. It's ready to ride. So I just wanted to show you guys the completed setup. Those rear signal lights as well are LED, and they don't have a resistor. So I'm getting the disco ball strobe light flash. But anyways, that is what it looks like. This is the first time this bike has been completely put together since I've owned it, and it's been over a year, embarrassingly. But I'm really, really excited. And it's running it's just running really nice, just purring as it should. It's got nice, fresh 94 octane gas in it, and everything's been cleaned and rebuilt. So I'm not too worried about the rear taillight wiring. I just stuck it back together enough to get the signal lights working, because I'm going to get rid of all this big ugly contraption and these cheesy LEDs and get that mud flap delete set up. I'm going to be ordering that. I didn't want to start ordering more parts, accessories until I knew this thing was going to run. But yeah, the engine's really quiet. You know, there's no banging from that, the rod and crank tolerance. It doesn't have to be wore out to be noisy. In any case, this is great having this done. I'm gonna go now. I can get registered my name. Like I say, all I've got to do is the front wheel bearings. I will be making those greasable like I did on the rear. Anyways, guys, that's where I'm gonna leave this build. I hope you enjoyed the build. I hope that it helped if you are rebuilding a Drz400 of your own. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. Hopefully I can remember if you're asking questions, what part I was working on at the time, what I did to fix it. I want to thank all the new subscribers. I hope you guys are enjoying the content. My channel is still growing. I'm really happy about that, and I couldn't do it without you guys. So let me know what you liked, the videos that you like to see, what you want to be involved in. You'll probably see this bike again. I will be riding it more, and I will be probably, if I keep this one, I'll probably be respraying it at least, maybe revalving the suspension. I'll see how it goes. First, I've got to get it out running and riding and see how I like it. So as I say, thanks guys. Give me a like if you liked the video, and give me a subscribe if you want to see more like it. Happy wrenching, and I hope all your projects are going well. See you on the next one.